All right, so in this explainer, we're doing something a little different. We're going to conduct a kind of forensic audit of a text that makes a pretty wild claim that our entire financial system is not at all what we think it is. Now, we're not here to say this is true or false. We're just acting as auditors, breaking down its arguments piece by piece.
The source material we're digging into today kicks things off with this one single, really provocative question. It basically challenges you, right from the get-go, to look at the world of finance not as a field of opportunity, but as a carefully designed architecture of control.
So what's the actual thesis here? Well, the source claims that the global economy is this incredibly precise machine, but its main purpose, according to this text, isn't to create wealth for everyone. It's to harvest human life force, and what it means by that is our time, our energy, even our emotions, and turn all of it into something that can be controlled.
The source has a name for this system, the debt prison. In this model, the walls aren't made of steel bars. They're made of numbers on a computer server. The chains? Well, those are your mortgage, your student loans, your credit card debt. And the whole point, it claims, is to keep almost everyone in a state of owing something, forever.
Okay, so you might be thinking, how could a system this massive, this all-encompassing, even get started? Well, the source we're auditing says it all goes back to a single top-secret event, a meeting on a private island that allegedly wrote the blueprint for our entire modern financial world. The story starts by taking the official history we all learned and just flipping it on its head. You know, the history books say that after the big financial panic of 1907, everybody wanted a central bank to create stability. But this text claims that crisis wasn't an accident. It argues it was engineered, a controlled demolition, specifically to make the public demand the very solution that the architects of the system had already planned out.
And who were these architects? The source is very specific here. In November of 1910, a group of men representing about a quarter of the world's wealth got together in complete secrecy on Jekyll Island. And this wasn't just some random get-together. We're talking about the heads of the Rockefeller, Morgan, and the European Warburg banking empires, all meeting with their key political guy, Senator Aldrich.
In the plan they cooked up, according to the source, was rolled out like a legislative ambush. The first move was getting the 16th Amendment passed, which created the income tax. But the final move came late on the night of December 22, 1913. Most of Congress had already gone home for Christmas, and the Federal Reserve Act was supposedly rushed through an almost empty room and signed into law. The source really drives this point home with a quote attributed to President Woodrow Wilson, which it frames as this chilling confession. Years after signing the act, he supposedly said he had unknowingly ruined his country and turned it over to the control of a small, powerful group of men.
So that's the origin story the text lays out. But how does this so-called prison actually work, day in and day out? Well, according to the source, the control mechanism isn't physical force. It's a simple but supposedly inescapable mathematical trap that's built right into the way money is created.
The source breaks the mechanism down like this. Step 1. The government needs cash, let's say $1 billion, so it issues a bond, which is basically just an IOU. Step 2. The Federal Reserve then creates $1 billion, poof, just out of thin air, to buy that bond. Step 3. That new money is now in the economy, but the government owes the Fed that $1 billion back, plus interest. And this right here, this is the core of the trap, according to the source. Only the principle, that first $1 billion was ever created. The money needed to pay the interest, it was never brought into existence.
And that leads to what the text calls the system's kill shot. From the very moment the first dollar is created, the total amount of debt in the system is always greater than the total amount of money available to pay it back. So according to this theory, bankruptcy isn't a bug in the system, it's a mathematical certainty. It has to happen to someone.
And the source argues that this math problem leads to some pretty devastating, built-in consequences. It creates an artificial scarcity of money, which forces everyone into a constant rat race. It makes defaults and bankruptcies unavoidable, which then lets creditors scoop up real assets, land, houses, businesses. And maybe most importantly, it creates this cancerous need for endless economic growth, not to make life better, but just to keep up with the interest on an ever-growing pile of debt.
So if you have all this unpayable interest, how do you collect it? Well, the source argues that the income tax, that 16th Amendment that was passed right before the Fed was created, has one main job: to act as the enforcer, the collection agency, for the interest owed to this private banking cartel. So the machine is built nationally. But the text argues it didn't stop there. The next step was to scale it up,
to turn the entire planet into a kind of financial plantation. The source points to a very specific series of events that made this possible. The really big one was in 1971, when the US completely severed the dollar's link to gold. All of a sudden, the dollar was a fiat currency, backed by nothing but faith. This created a huge problem. Why would the rest of the world want a currency that's backed by nothing? The source claims the answer was engineered just 2 years later through a secret deal that created the Petrodollar system.
And what the system did was mandate that all oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, had to be bought and sold using US dollars. Think about that for a second. Suddenly, every single country on Earth, no matter where they were, needed a big stash of US dollars just to keep their lights on. And just like that, you have a permanent, artificial global demand for a currency that, the source reminds us, can be created out of thin air.
And what happens if a country decides it doesn't want to play along? Well, this is where the source makes its most serious geopolitical claim. It argues that the primary mission of the US military effectively changed. Its new job became acting as the global enforcer of the petrodollar. The text points to leaders who tried to sell oil for other currencies, like Saddam Hussein with the euro or Muammar Gaddafi's plan for a gold-backed currency, and says they were quickly targeted for regime change.
So we've gone through the supposed history, the mechanics, the global enforcement, but this brings us to the source's final and, frankly, most bizarre claim. It argues that all of this, the debt, the conflict, the constant pressure, it's not ultimately about money or even power. The true purpose, it alleges, is metaphysical.
The source puts it very bluntly. It says the entire global economic system is a factory farm designed for the mass production of something it calls loosh. Yes, loosh. It's a term that refers to emotional energy. And the source connects the dots directly between the economic mechanisms and this emotional harvest. It says the perpetual debt cycle is designed to produce hopelessness and desperation. Engineered scarcity, that's there to generate competition, envy, and conflict. The stress of living paycheck to paycheck, that's a reliable factory for chronic anxiety and fear. In this worldview, these negative emotions aren't just unfortunate side effects of the system. They are its primary, intended product. So the final indictment from the source is this. The system isn't broken. In fact, it's working perfectly. It's a ruthlessly efficient machine that's designed to do one thing: convert the high potential of human life and creativity into a harvest of low-frequency emotional energy. And this is the source's final, chilling conclusion. It alleges that in the cold, hard logic of this economic operating system, people aren't citizens to be served, they're resources to be harvested.
And so our audit ends right where it began, with that central question posed by the source material. Now, whether you dismiss all this as a crazy conspiracy theory or you see it as a disturbing new way to look at the world, it forces you to think. And the final question it leaves us all with is this: is our economy designed to serve us, or is it designed to feed on us?